Okay, well, Dr. Sims, I want to thank you for joining our Chemistry 108 class today. As I mentioned to you before, Chemistry 108 is all about being a chemistry, biochemistry major at the university. It's a fairly new class, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with the students and provide them with some advice.
Yes, my pleasure.
One of the things that I think is unique that you can offer is that you were actually a double major while you were here, and so I'm sure that a number of the students will understand a little bit better what it's like being a chemistry and another major while you're an undergraduate. That you taking the time.
Yeah, of course. Anything I can do.
All right. So could you tell us just briefly when you were a Golden Eagle?
Yeah, so I started my freshman year in August 2010, and then I graduated in May 2014. So I've followed the typical 4-year track at USM.
Okay, so not only a double major, but a double major in 4 years.
It was tough at times, but somehow managed to make it through.
Yeah, you made it through just fine. That's right. That's right. So I've got 4 basic questions that I want to ask. We may have some follow-ups from some of those, and then I'll give you an opportunity to give the students any advice that you would like. So question number 1 is, why did you pick chemistry biochemistry as one of your majors?
Yeah, so I've always been really interested in chemistry for most of my life. When I was a kid, I remember my parents would bring home those chemistry kits you used to be able to buy and do little chemistry experiments. So it was always an interesting subject for me. And then starting around late middle school, I did a summer camp program in polymer science at USM. And that's where I started getting interested in polymers as well. And for a while, I thought that polymers would be my sole career path. So I start Southern Miss as a polymer science major, and I get through my first year, and then starting my sophomore year, we have to take organic chemistry. I really enjoyed general chemistry. I found it really interesting. But once I started taking organic chemistry, I'm sure you remember with you, it really was an exciting course. I really enjoyed it, and to me, that was the first course that I took where I really felt like I was learning true chemistry. Chemistry in the sense of you're mixing things together, you're making molecules, you're doing the hands-on type of chemistry, and it fascinated me. And so I always knew, being a polymer science major, that I would need to have some type of chemistry knowledge. But once I started taking organic chemistry, I realized that I didn't want just to have a passable knowledge of chemistry. I wanted to have a really deep, extensive knowledge of the subject to complement what I was learning in polymer science. So by the end of my sophomore year, when I wrapped up my Organic Chemistry 2 class, I decided that I think it would be best for me to do a double major. That way I could learn both aspects of it.
All right, fantastic. Well, that's great. So when did you start getting involved in undergraduate research when you were here as a Golden Eagle?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. I was able to get started in research the summer before my freshman year. So I had met Professor McCormick actually at a tennis club that I used to play at. And he found out that I was interested in polymer science, and so I was able to get my start working in his research group, like I said, the summer before my freshman year. And, I think my experience in undergraduate research was probably the most important thing that I did at Southern Miss. It's one thing to learn concepts in a class. It's a totally different thing to actually apply them in hands-on research. And part of the reason why I think that I found myself so interested in organic chemistry my sophomore year was that I had already been exposed to it in my undergrad research that I was doing my freshman year. Mm-hmm. I would remember that my graduate student mentors, that in that research group, we did a lot of synthetic work. We did a lot of work making different polymers and doing a lot of hands-on organic chemistry. And I remember my graduate mentors would always try to explain the reactions that we were doing and the concepts behind what we were doing. And of course, I didn't totally understand it because I didn't know organic chemistry, but it kind of fertilized the soil in my mind, so that once I started actually taking the class, I could connect those concepts that I was being introduced to in the course to actual practical physical things that I had done and seen in research. So I think undergrad research was, and I think it is for just about everyone, is one of the best learning experiences that you can have.
Absolutely. It's definitely a high impact practice, and you did research at every stage of your undergraduate, right? And towards the end, you were actually doing 2 research projects, right?
Right. Yeah. I joined your research group the summer after my sophomore year. Yep.
Yeah. And started doing a little bit of work there for the capstone. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that actually ended up being a really valuable experience for me. You know, so the type of research that we did in my polymer research group was very different from the research that I did in your group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in polymer research, we kind of have this narrow niche of chemical techniques that we apply. But once if you go into a graduate program, or if you work in a hands-on chemistry program, you're usually going to be exposed to a lot of different demands, and you're going to need to figure out a lot of different things. And so when I worked in your research group, I learned new techniques. I had to do different types of chemistry. I had to work on different scales of chemistry. So when I was doing my work in the polymer research group, basically we were working with materials on multiple grams scale. Whereas in your research group, I started having to learn to work on very small scales, like on the milligram scale. And so learning how to work with different techniques was really valuable, and I found out once I started my graduate program.
Okay, great. So so you haven't started your career yet per se, but how did your undergraduate program here in chemistry prepare you for your postdoctoral position that you're in now?
Oh, I think my I would put my undergraduate experience at Southern Miss in chemistry up there with every other program and at every other university in the country. You know, even the Ivy Leagues. You know, I went to graduate school with people who went to really prestigious universities, and even people who went to Ivy Leagues. And you know, I don't think that they really knew anything more than what I knew coming out of undergraduate at Southern Miss. I think I had just as valuable, if not more valuable, of an undergraduate research experience. My base of knowledge was just as good compared to theirs as well.
Okay, fantastic. So maybe you could tell the students a little bit about your current job as a postdoc, and just give them a little flavor for what being a postdoctoral researcher is all about.
Yeah, so being a postdoc is pretty similar to being a graduate student, I would say. So my day-to-day work basically looks like when I get to lab, I usually spend some time catching up on emails, Slack messages, reading any papers that may come out. Then most of the rest of the time I spend actually in lab. So my job as a postdoc here is I do mostly polymer research here. The project that I'm working on, broadly speaking, we're looking at trying to make solid polymer electrolyte material, so solid polymer, solid plastics that can conduct electricity. So I spend a lot of time in the actual lab making polymers, testing polymers, running experiments to make sure these polymers have the properties we want them to have. And yeah, that's my day-to-day life here. That's pretty similar to what you would see in graduate school as well in a PhD program.
Just no courses, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's I would say it's a much more focused experience than a grad student.
Absolutely, and for me anyway, and I'm sure it's probably going to be the same for you when you're done. You'll look back on or at least I look back on my postdoctoral years as some of the most scientifically formidable for me. I mean, there was just, constant interaction and growth in my knowledge and breadth of field and the whole 9 yards. It's just, a very fond time of my scientific development that I look back on. Not that my graduate work wasn't great. I mean, I enjoyed my graduate work as well, but it's just different, isn't it?
It is. It is. I felt the exact same way within the first few weeks of starting my postdoc. I think part of it is that as a postdoc, you don't have quite as much uncertainty as you do as a new grad student. You're more self-confident, having already been through the rigors of a PhD program. You know that you can handle challenges that come your way. But also, I think you're also very aware of the own limits of your knowledge, and so you really seek out interactions with other people who you can learn from.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the end of the formal questions that I had for you, but I do want to mention to the students that not only were you a double major while you were here at Southern Miss, you were an honors college student, Goldwater Scholar, you got an NSF fellowship to go to graduate school, so you were an extremely highly accomplished undergraduate student that went on and did very good things at your graduate work before you went on to your postdoc. And so after having accomplished all of that at this point, if you had to go back and tell your freshman self something that you would want to improve on, or a piece of advice or something you wish you had done differently, what would you tell yourself? Because I'm sure that kind of advice would be very helpful for our Chemistry 108 students.
Yeah, so I think one of the best things that you can do as an undergrad is take every opportunity that's presented to you. There are going to be times where opportunities come your way, such as the opportunity to double major, the opportunity to join another research group, and or to join certain organizations as well. And it can be easy to tell yourself, oh well, I don't know if I'll have the time for that. I don't know if it will work out. I don't know if it will be worth it. My belief is your undergrad you're never going to have another time like it in your life. And the best thing you can do is take every single opportunity that's presented to you. Now, you don't want to overextend yourself. You don't want to be involved in too many different things, so many different things that you're completely stressed out. Mm-hmm. But if you're on the fence about taking a chance, taking an opportunity, go for it, I'd say. Yeah. They usually end up being very valuable experiences.
Fantastic. That's great advice. And then plus also, right, when you're involved in research groups, we also have other things that we do other than research, right? Like we have Breaking Bad parties. And
yeah. Yep.
One of the more fun things that I think we did while you were here anyway, when that series was going. So.
Yeah, and don't shy away from the fun, social things like that. Some of the best friends that I've made in undergrad and grad school. I've got several friends actually who I met just at conferences from mingling and talking to people. Here's a good example. So in 2017, I went to a research conference called the Gordon Research Conference. So it's a small conference. About 200 people are attending it. You've got a mix of grad students, postdocs, faculty members. I met some other grad students there, and it's a 6-day long conference. So if you meet people, if you make friends there, then you're around them for a good bit of time. And long story short, one of the friends that I made at that conference, he ended up getting married 6 months later in Florida. And I lived in Florida at the time, and he invited me to his wedding. And so a group of us who had met for the first time at that conference all ended up going to this guy's wedding.
Wow.
We had a great time, and I still keep in touch with all of them.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And those are the types of things that I think, students are really going to be struggling with that kind of stuff right now with COVID and how to manage that. And, that's really an unfortunate thing, but we're trying in Chemistry 108 to keep them connected to activities, even though some of those are virtual. Mm-hmm. My class does actually meet face to face, and I know the students appreciate that. Mm-hmm. because it's just, we got to also keep health, wealth, and well-being in mind for the students in the community as well. So
right.
hopefully we'll get back to a more normal time, and they'll be able to actually engage face-to-face in a lot of the things that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Having the students know what they can gain from that, I think, is very valuable to them.
Yeah, speaking of COVID, one thing that I've kind of been trying to, this is something that I've been trying to work on myself, is not comparing my current career trajectory to what I had initially thought it was supposed to be, or to what I saw people do before COVID, because you're right, COVID is massively disrupted basically every aspect of our life in a lot of different ways. And so that's necessarily going to mean that plans may change. I'm certainly considering the prospect of my postdoc taking longer than I had originally planned on it taking. But that doesn't mean that I am failing as a postdoc. It's, a lot of other people are also having to make similar considerations. And so, like I said, something I'm working on, but I think it's important to kind of be easy on yourself too.
Yeah. COVID isn't our fault, right? So
right.
But it is something we've got to deal with, and so I think that's very good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Sims, I want to thank you again for your time, and I know that the students are going to enjoy hearing this and learning from your experience as a Golden Eagle, and especially your experience as a double major in two what most people would consider hard sciences, and the fact that you were able to do that in 4 years and be very successful doing it. So I think it's an inspiration to those students, and I want to thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course, and thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm always happy to talk to students who are following a similar path, and maybe share some of my experiences, so maybe they can perhaps avoid some of the pitfalls that I might have fallen into as an undergrad. I'm always happy to talk to students about this.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.